Hello, welcome to my show, and thanks to any replay viewers later on. My name's Davina. I'm an American migrant to the United States, talking about extremism in politics and radicalization on the right. Today's top trending topic on Twitter is Apple. And Apple is trending at the moment, I believe, because of comments that Tim Cook has made that suggest Twitter might be removed from the Apple App Store. And if it is, that'll be thanks to the increasingly blatant right-wing extremism of its new owner, billionaire and latent sociopath Elon Musk. So let's have a look. Twitter account holder Christopher Boozy notes that Philip Schiller deactivated his Twitter account. So it used to look like this. Let's see if I can make it a bit bigger. Philip Schiller, and then it said that account doesn't exist. And that occurred just the day before Thanksgiving or the day of Thanksgiving. I think the day before Thanksgiving. I'd like to note that an SUV car, was driven by a gentleman called Bradley Rain into an Apple storefront in a town in Massachusetts called Hingham. Wouldn't have made the national news. You won't necessarily know about it, but it killed one person and injured, let me check, I think 18 others. Published November the 21st. Okay, so that's a couple of days before Thanksgiving. Let me just bring that news story up, though. If you know me, you will know perhaps that I've been broadcasting about Trump and the unhooding of the Republican Party for a few years now. But this is a story about this dude called Bradley Rain, who had been charged the year before with drunk driving. He's a 53-year-old man. He's currently been moved to jail. He claims to have been looking for an eyeglass store when his foot got stuck on the accelerator. Now, he doesn't describe a mechanism for his foot getting stuck on the accelerator, so he doesn't really have any credibility for that story. What seems more plausible to me, and I'm waiting for people who knew Bradley and who know Bradley to come forward, is that he's likely been radicalized, and that it's no coincidence that he drove his car at speed through a car park on November the 21st, a busy time for a small shopping center in a upmarket Massachusetts town, that he drove his SUV at speed into an Apple storefront because he had been radicalized and was taking vengeance against what he saw as an enemy of big tech, who appeared to be potentially withdrawing support from Twitter under Elon Musk's increasingly radical right-wing ownership. So Bradley Rain, 53-year-old white man, charged the year before with a drink driving offense. This time, blood alcohol level registered at 0.00, but implausibly argued that his foot got stuck on the accelerator. So perhaps now I'll just go into a story reporting on this so that you can see more for yourself. So let's see who's reporting this. This is Boston NBC. Local coverage, in-depth news coverage of the greater Boston area. A huge bang. Witnesses describe deadly Hingham Apple Store crash. Several people walked past the Apple Store at the Derby Street shops in Hingham, Massachusetts, moments before a car crashed into it Monday morning, killing one person and injuring more than a dozen others.
Apple Store in
Let's look at this, because this is a big picture. You can see the hole in the Apple Store. To me, it's really important to contend with the increasing radicalization of people. Now, from my perspective, and I would suggest that there's empirical evidence to back that up, it's concentrated on the right. There's right-wing domestic terrorism has been on the increase in the United States. January the 6th, propelled largely by white supremacist forces. The Oklahoma bombings, the Oklahoma building bombing by Timothy McVeigh, again, white supremacist domestic terrorism. It doesn't go away if you ignore it. Yes, people like Donald Trump create space for it, embolden it, but it has to be argued with productively, and it has to be overpowered in a democratic sense by people talking about the threats, talking about the problem, until there's a sufficiently high level of alert to motivate people to go out and vote whilst there are sufficient democratic guardrails still in place. Because we know what happens with full steam ahead, right-wing escalation. You get fascism, and fascism burns democratic bridges around it in order to entrench consolidated central authoritarian power. Using manipulative tactics of conflating patriotism, usually with loyalty to a centralized strongman fascist figure, usually someone with charismatic appeal to a certain subset of the population whom they enthuse through evoking contrarian glee. And by contrarian glee, I mean that kind of defiant, almost childlike energy you get from violating taboos, from saying things you're not supposed to say, being racist when there's good and civilized reasons for trying to refrain from that kind of tribalistic, irrational hatred, and laundering those tribalistic, impulsive hatreds as somehow respectable responses to genuine threats. And they get to there by fear-mongering, by having allies in the media who are willing to publish fear-mongering, hate-crazed, disproportionate representation of threats. So mischaracterizing migrants as invaders instead of contributors, overly focusing on CTV footage of people from a certain minority background committing crimes in order to fearmonger about Black Americans, and also fearmongering about LGBTQ people and teachers and parents and allies of the same, in order to claim that this social fabric is being attacked and eroded and can only be defended by people voting Republican. Coincidentally, the party of receiving huge sums of money from theocratic Christian nationalist billionaires or libertarian billionaires who are hell-bent on opposing wokeness in society in favor of enhancing compliance of lowly taxpayers, who can then subsidize tax benefits being given to wealthy people who are allowed to purchase disproportionate amounts of political power through the Citizens United decision. Are you familiar with that decision? It's a 2010 decision of the conservative-stacked majority Supreme Court, who decided that money deserved the protections of free speech, that money was somehow equivalent to a human voter in the United States, and money donated by corporations was a form of speech, and corporations should be allowed to have protected speech in the same way that American citizens have, on paper, protected speech under the First Amendment clause of the Constitution. Alrighty, let's press play just to have a little look at this store.
Hingham, while people shopped and worked inside. One is dead, 17 injured.
17.
Tonight, we're learning more about how the crash happened. Good evening. I'm Glenn Jones.
And I'm Priscilla Casper. A busy morning of shopping for many turned into a scene of terror. We have team coverage tonight as we try to make sense of what is being called an unthinkable morning in Hingham. We're going to start with our Michael Rosenfield joining.
People seem to increasingly be saying, stay safe, as a greeting, as a expression of goodwill. And that's because in America, it is increasingly obvious that people are not safe when it comes to domestic terror attacks, that there are increasingly frequent acts of mass shooting, and also people on the edge taking whatever means are available to them, whether it's the lethality of a large car driven at speed, and they're availing themselves of that opportunity to murder and injure as many people as they can in a short space of time. Whether they drive an SUV through a Christmas parade, or they ram their SUV into an Apple storefront. The man who drove into a Christmas parade, Darrell Brooks, he doesn't appear necessarily to many people to have been radicalized by the right wing, but at the same time, when he was defending himself in court, having pled not guilty to his very evident crimes, he was using a lot of sovereign citizen arguments, denying that his name was his name, insisting on legally representing himself, and that kind of desertion of community, that kind of desertion of belonging to a nation that is governed by the rule of law, that is a topic, that is a position that has a lot of potency in today's American right wing, that government is inherently bad and that people should protest against that by asserting their individual freedoms as much as possible, often in defiance of the law where possible. You'll find a lot of right-wing commentators arguing for that type of civil disobedience, even if it doesn't always reach the extremes of suggesting that everybody should declare themselves to be a sovereign citizen. But most sovereign citizens, I think, would be right-wing, and you can also easily convert extreme left-wing people into extreme right-wing positions, as you can see from the Nancy Pelosi attacker, who was a conspiratorial-minded left-wing, far-left person, who then adopted a lot of the positions and beliefs and crazed beliefs, sociopathic beliefs of the current American right wing. And he attacked Paul Pelosi after believing that the election had been stolen from Donald Trump and that he was at Nancy Pelosi's home in order to break her kneecaps to persuade her to tell the truth about the stolen election. And she wasn't home, so he instead took her husband hostage and attacked him with a hammer after the police had arrived in answer to Paul Pelosi's coded call for help. So yes, I'll get rid of that story about Hingham, but as I said, you might not have heard of it because it wasn't national news. We're still waiting for more information, but I'll keep Googling his name, Bradley Rain. Not that I want to give him notoriety, but I want to know if he was radicalized. And I want people to be aware of the danger that just quietly accepting how extreme Fox News is, how extreme and antisocial Fox News is and has been for a number of years now, because that extremism and that degree of antisocial rhetoric has only escalated. It's not just divisive, it's violence inciting to repeatedly describe migrants as invading. America is a society that has already agreed to welcome migrants and asylum seekers. So for a former president like Donald Trump, when he was in office, to have a purposeful policy to enact mind-boggling levels of cruelty on migrants by separating children from their caregivers and family members, with the explicit intent of deterring asylum seekers, to say, okay, yep, sure, we on paper have signed up to conventions, we have signed up to agreements that say we have to process the claims of asylum seekers, and if found to have merit, we have to allow asylum seekers a place in this country, to instead say, well, we don't feel like following that law, so what we're going to do is take your children away, and then have the stories about the cruelty and the torment experienced by children, the sexual assault experienced by many children in detention without the care and oversight of their parents or relatives, the physical assault, the emotional assault, particularly on young children who were too young to realize that their parents had not willingly separated from them, to instead create an absolute emotional chasm of young children believing that their parents had abandoned them and that they couldn't trust human relationships going forward. That level of just psychosis-inducing trauma. I mean, there was one, I think, 7-year-old boy who had to be restrained to stop himself from throwing himself out of a high window because his father had disappeared, and he believed that his father had been killed and that he would soon be killed himself, because he wasn't aware that his father had just been detained in a separate location. And as we now know, the Trump administration did not bother to keep records of which children they were separating from which parents, because they didn't care. They didn't wish to facilitate parent-child reunions. They wished to become infamous for cruelty, and so appeal to their voters who would delight in that level of cruelty being meted out to refugees and asylum seekers and migrants, because they would exult in that show of power and show of lack of compassion and human sentiment, because they don't want to comply. They don't want to comply with the pre-existing laws that say America has a commitment to refugees and to processing their claims. All right, well, I'm going to go now, but thank you to those who have tuned in today. Do I have any concluding remarks about Elon Musk and Apple? Well, we'll go back and we'll see what the update is on Apple on Twitter, which is still a nice website apart from the infestation of right-wing trolls and the additional racist sentiments that are now expressed without being taken down, the influx of Nazi supporting accounts, the emboldenment of Nazis and violent people on this particular media platform, because Elon Musk has given a wink and a nod to those people, as well as firing most, if not all, of the people in charge of policing the social media platform to remove hateful or violence inciting content, including Nazis. What is this? Nope, I accidentally clicked on an ad. Whoopsie gypsies, because they were capitalizing on Elon. All right. Elon suggests he's open to producing a smartphone. Yeah, I don't know. Elon is scared that Apple will drop Twitter from the App Store, so he's preemptively attacking Apple to intimidate them. It's so transparent what he's doing, writes Alejandra Caraballo, who is she? She is a Harvard Law cyber law clinic person. So she's a Harvard Law professor. I'm sure, she writes, sending hordes of his Twitter followers to harass and threaten Apple executives will help his cause. So yes, all of the Elon Musk misguided fanboys and potentially fangirls, although they do always seem to be fanboys, predominantly male people, accounts on Twitter, will be rushing to harass Apple. And we don't know if anybody will join Bradley Stein in his act of likely domestic terrorism and driving his SUV into an Apple storefront. I'm not trying to encourage that activity, so I'll, instead of saying the driver's name, I'll say the Hingham driver who attacked an Apple store and killed one 65-year-old male and severely injured 17 others in the process. Apple restricts AirDrop file sharing in China that protesters have used. Well, that's a shame. I mean, there has been increasing numbers of protests after 10 China residents were killed in an apartment building fire where the doors had been closed in some way that people couldn't leave in order to supplement their COVID zero policies. So 10 people dying in an apartment fire. You can see why people would be upset and want to protest that. Apple gave Fortnite the boot for not agreeing with the Apple Store revenue share, and the game was making $1 billion on Apple's iOS. Something tells me Apple won't be rattled by Musk and his army of 150,000 users paying $8. All right, so Elon Musk is tweeting more things against Apple by noting accurately that Apple does have a 30% cut of things that you buy through their Apple Store. Yes, apparently they take 30% from app developers who make over $1 million through the App Store on an annual basis. So those developers that hit the relative big time, they are giving up a significant amount of their proceeds to Apple, and that's how it is. Elon Musk is trying to capitalize on telling people negative and true things about Apple. But yes, so that is exciting. Do we think it's true that Apple has threatened to withhold Twitter from its App Store? At this point, I think we only have Elon Musk's word for it. But it seems also potentially plausible in that what would Elon Musk's motivation be for lying about that? Maybe just if he's paranoid and fears that Apple might want to withdraw Twitter from its App Store, particularly because Philip Schiller, the head of App Store development, closed his own personal account on Twitter on November the 21st, which was also the same day that the Hingham driver, 53-year-old male, attacked the Apple Store. Okay, all good. We have a tech writer called Brianna Wu. Let's check what she is. She's the executive director of Rebellion PAC, former candidate for the US House in Massachusetts, and a software engineer who likes to go fast and has a following of 130,000 people. So she's saying Elmo's latest war against spins the wheel of enemies, Apple, contains quite a few distortions, which makes this functionally a lie. Let's go through them. Oh, so he's posting, that he could choose to either pay 30% to Apple or choose go to war, and he's representing himself as choosing war against Apple. So first of all, Apple would not get 30% of a Twitter Blue subscription. They would get 15% after 12 months. This has been the case for a long time. Small app developers fought for this change. Ironic, a billionaire is now profiting from it. All right, so during a subscriber's first year of service, you being the Twitter app owner, 70% of the subscription price at each billing cycle minus applicable taxes. After a user accumulates 1 year of paid service, your net revenue increases to 85%. All right. So they get 30% for the first year and then only 15%. Secondly, the wider argument that Elmo wants to pick with Apple about their rules not allowing apps with unmoderated hate speech is not new. This has been the case in the App Store since Steve Jobs was alive. Many people, myself included, believe he wrote them himself. Well, Steve Jobs was also the son of Lebanese migrants, wasn't he? So he possibly had that basis for understanding that hate speech against migrants, that cynical exploitation of the worst of human nature in terms of tribalistic fear-mongering was bad in terms of constructing a cohesive, functional, mutually supportive society. So he wrote presumably anti-hate speech clauses in Apple terms. Elmo should have known this would be an issue with Apple. It's gross incompetence not to understand that. Lastly, unlike Elmo, Apple takes GDPR compliance seriously. Now, I'm not sure what GDPR is. Gross domestic. Nope, don't know what that is. Oh, perhaps it's to do with European Union rules. Elmo is on a collision with European regulators. His plan for Twitter breaks many of their rules. So now Tim Cook, who is the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of Apple, is also trending. People are noting that picking a fight with Tim Cook isn't going to work. For one, he's not a manic toddler hopped up on Twinkies and weaponry cosplay. Plus, no advertiser likes to spend their marketing money in Thunderdome of toxic asininity. Ooh, asininity is an exciting word. Just checking my Boston is trending. Oh my gosh, there's a royal visit about to take place in Boston. Who's Kensington Royal? And there's going to be a prize of Earthshot Boston. That's nice. Earthshot prize. People are nominated. Ooh. All right. Oh, Prince William and Princess Catherine are coming to town. They chose Boston for their first US visit as Prince and Princess of Wales. Then they go, I live in the greater Boston area, so wow, that's a beautiful shot of the Boston Public Gardens with the trees all in red. I think that's a good time for me to go. Thank you to those who've watched today. I'm not suggesting you go visit Prince William and Princess Catherine. I'm suggesting you look up for yourself the Hingham Apple Store crash and join with me in ramping up anticipation of further news on the driver and why he claimed to have his foot stuck on the accelerator, and to consider and to speculate with me, is there an increasing problem in the United States with right-wing radicalized acts of terror? Because left-wing radicalism exists as well. Those people on that side of the domestic terror coin often like to make guillotines, or at least pictures of guillotines, and talk about how there's class warfare, but they haven't acted on their violent rhetoric in any substantive way, whereas we've had decades now of right-wing terrorist acts that have resulted in people's death, significant loss of life, and significant loss of health and well-being as well, because people don't just get killed, don't just die in a bombing, people also lose limbs and functionality and are traumatized. There's a lot of loss. There's a lot of theft of joy and theft of functioning, as well as theft of decades of potential existence that come when a radicalized human being decides to act out with mass shootings or bombings or use of vehicle as a terror weapon, when they make those bad choices. So take care, watch out for radicalization, try to counter it if you can in your daily life. One good way is to undermine some of the false political beliefs that help prop up right-wing facilitators in office. And I'm talking about Republicans who've been winking and nodding whilst Donald Trump has literally had dinner with America's foremost young neo-Nazi, Nick Fuentes, who has, in the past few weeks, agreed with Kanye West's anti-Semitic remarks, but said that as he's a Christian, he thinks Jews should literally leave the country, work for the devil, shouldn't have any access to power, shouldn't be in positions of power, because if you don't love Jesus, if he's not part of your belief system, then you are an agent of the devil. That's what Nick Fuentes said about people who were Jewish, but you can derive from that more broadly to anybody who's not a practicing Christian. He's a white supremacist, modern-day Nazi in the United States. He holds a yearly conference that's well attended by his fellow young Nazis. And he's also invited Marjorie Taylor Greene to speak at one of his conferences, and she did so. Marjorie Taylor Greene was potentially rumored to be invited to be Donald Trump's next running mate as he runs for president. He had dinner. He literally had dinner a couple of days ago with Kanye West, who lost billions of dollars of endorsements and deals by saying he was going DEFCON 3 on Jews and saying that he could say any anti-Semitic things he wanted and that Adidas would not fire him or would not be able to sever their contract with him. However, they did sever their contract with him because people tend to have some clauses for extraordinary misconduct, and saying that you can say whatever anti-Semitic things you like and you won't be constrained by anyone, that would constitute, one imagines, as an activator of a legal clause in a contract that says extraordinary bad behavior is cause for severance of a contract, even if it's for billions of dollars worth of Adidas apparel designed by Kanye West. But anyway, as I said, I'm going. Take care, everybody. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving break and can take care of yourself and rest adequately and find contentment and peace in your own lives, while still maintaining a degree of alertness and alarm about the various ways in which fascist rhetoric has taken hold of a lot of people's minds, not only in this country, the United States, but around the world. And you don't want people marching ahead full steam, unchallenged, with the kind of nihilistic, destructive ideas and actions, because that kind of style of thinking and acting, Freud described it as Thanatos, having a death wish. And it's not necessarily their own death. It can be a desire for destruction of other people. And people have spent years philosophizing about and thinking about how to best counter, how to best mitigate against that kind of destructive yearnings and destructive activities and destructive thinking, because they're all lumped in together, and you have to find ways to challenge it and to counter its potency. So stand up, be vocal for decency, for communal spirit, for cherishing the contribution of migrants and valuing people who move countries to seek refuge, to start a new life for themselves and their families, and build businesses, help reduce labor bottlenecks, and just add to their newly adopted countries. So don't forget, because writing off migrants as invaders, writing off gay people or falsely ascribing negative characteristics to all gay people or all trans people, those are strategies that lead people into book banning and acts of fomented violence against clientele of a gay club, whether they're gay or straight, because there were straight people who lost their lives in the Club Q shooting in Colorado Springs. There's such incredible, grotesque theft of life, of happiness, of limb, when we ignore radicalization and we let it flourish uncontested. So let me write that down. Let's not let radicalization flourish uncontested. Let's not let radicalization and hate and irrational hate the only way to crowd out the weeds is to keep planting flowers. Keep planting and sharing flowers. Crowd out the weeds. and challenge bad ideas. And openly challenge bad ideas. There you go. Done. Bye.